Now we're going to talk about the next aspect, even the next step of God's organic salvation, which is conformation, to be conformed to the image of God's firstborn Son. Conformation is the end result, it's even the consummation of our being transformed in life. The Lord is transforming us by dispensing his life and his nature and his element into us. And gradually our element becomes God. Even though we remain ourselves, we're being made into his image. But conformation is more than transformation. Conformation has to do with an image, it has to do with a shape, and it has to do with an expression. So the first God man, Christ, has a certain image and a certain expression. As a God man, he expressed God. By our growth and our transformation through God's organic salvation, we need to take on the same image. We need to take on the same expression. So Romans 8:29 says, because those whom God foreknew, he also predestinated to be conformed to the image of his Son. So we're to be conformed to the image of God's Son so that Christ might be the firstborn among many brothers. So if he's you just imagine he's a big, strong brother, and then all of his little brothers are scrawny weaklings. They just don't match. Well, our Christ has a glorious image. He expresses God in his living. So we need to be transformed and conformed to that extent so that we match him, so that he could be the firstborn among many brothers that are just like him. God's firstborn son is Christ, the God man, and we, God's many sons, need to be conformed to the image of God's firstborn son. This is to be full grown in life, to be mature God men. Conformation has to do with shape. So if I took a cake, a cake batter, and put it in a butterfly shaped pan and baked it, that cake would take on the shape of the butterfly. It would take on the shape of the mold. That's conformation, kind of an outward example. But actually, conformation has to do with life. There's a life essence in the divine life. And this life essence has a life power. And through this life growing, the life power causes that life to take on a certain shape. Now, let me give you an example of this. I'm going to share my screen. So in the last two houses we've lived at, we've planted these native Colorado wildflowers called milkweed, which happens to also be the exclusive food of the monarch butterfly. Very beautiful butterfly. And this year we've had several monarchs come and land on the plants and lay little eggs. The eggs are really tiny. You almost need a magnifying glass to see them. And then the eggs hatch and little teeny tiny caterpillars come out, which you can barely see. And right away they start eating and they grow and they grow and they grow until they become these gorgeous black, yellow, and white striped caterpillars. These are monarch caterpillars. And eventually, through the monarch caterpillar eating and growing, it's transformed, and it begins its process of transformation by becoming a chrysalis. Now, chrysalis is emerald green with gold flecks and a gold and black stripe around it. It's absolutely gorgeous. And after about 2 weeks, the chrysalis becomes clear, and you can see the monarch butterfly inside. Now, this monarch butterfly, it cuts a little hole in the chrysalis, and then it has to come out through that hole. It's a very difficult process for the butterfly, squeezing itself through that hole. And sometimes people want to help, and they make the hole a little bit bigger. And what happens if they do that is the butterfly comes out deformed, because it actually needs to go through that difficult process in order to be conformed to the right shape for its wings to fill out and for it to become this gorgeous monarch butterfly. So this is a process in life. It has a life essence with a life power, and through transformation, eventually that life power conforms it to a life shape. In this case, the shape of the monarch butterfly. But for us, we have the life power of the divine life in us, and it's conforming us to the image of God's firstborn son. Now, Christ went through quite a difficult process in his life to become God's firstborn son. And we also need to go through certain circumstances in our environment in order to be conformed to his image. So Paul said in Philippians 3:10, to know him and the power of his resurrection and the fellowship of his sufferings, being conformed to his death. So we need the power of Christ's resurrection to go through all the different things in our lives, to keep open to the Lord, to keep our hearts turned to him so that he would dispense himself and to us, transform us and conform us to the image of Christ. Now, at the mature stage of God's organic salvation, as we're being conformed to the image of God's firstborn son, the expression is that we would live Christ. Like Paul talked about in Philippians 1:19 through 21, he said, I know that for me, this will turn out to salvation through your petition and the bountiful supply of the Spirit of Jesus Christ. He said, according to my earnest expectation and hope that in nothing I will be put to shame, but with all boldness, even now Christ will be magnified in my body. Paul wanted Christ to be magnified in his body. This is being conformed to the image of God's firstborn son, whether through life or through death. He even said, for to me to live is Christ. Eventually, through the process of transformation and conformation, we'll become reprints of the God-man Christ. We'll become exactly like him, like like it says in 1 John 3:2. It's not been manifested what we will be. We know that if he is manifested, we will be like him because we'll see him even as he is. So this is the end result of our beholding and reflecting the Lord. We will become just like